welcome to Turn the Page, the official podcast of the Syosset Public Library.
Hello, everybody. It's Evelyn Hershkowitz, Reader Services Librarian here. Today we have a special guest with us, Ashley Winstead, and we're going to talk about her book, The Boyfriend Candidate, that comes out next Tuesday on May 9th. And for those of you who'd like to put it on hold, we do have a copy coming in print, and it will be available on Overdrive in both print, ebook, and audiobook also. And I did just listen to a snippet of the audiobook, and that was very good. So let me just tell everybody a little bit about Ashley, and then we'll start talking to her. She's an academic turned novelist with a PhD in contemporary American literature. Her 2022 romance debut, Fool Me Once, was an Amazon Editor's Best Romance, as well as a US Today, Pop Sugar, New York Post, and Goodreads Best or Most Anticipated Romance of the Year. The Boyfriend Candidate, which is what we're going to talk about today, is going to be out on May 9th. Ashley first broke out as a thriller writer. Her 2021 debut, In My Dreams I Hold a Knife, was an Amazon Editor's Best Thriller and Apple Books Best Book of August, as well as a New York Times, Library Journal, Crime Reads Parade, and Goodreads Pick. Ashley lives in Texas with her husband, 2 cats, and beloved wine fridge. That's great. So
hi, Evelyn.
Nice to meet you. I absolutely loved The Boyfriend Candidate. It had so much going for it. It had a librarian in it. It had people that were interested in making sure that librarians were paid well.
Yes.
It was just so great. Everything about it I just loved. I loved the characters. They were just so great. I loved the slow burn. I loved everything about it. So why don't you tell everybody what it's about?
Yes. So The Boyfriend Candidate, and right now I'm just glowing, I have to say, for listeners after that amazing introduction and that you enjoyed the book. So The Boyfriend Candidate starts with our main character, Alexis Stone, who is a librarian. And for any readers who happen to have read my first romance, Fool Me Once, this book takes place in the same world, but it follows the younger sister of Fool Me Once's main character. So Alexis is a very different kind of person from her sister, where her sister Lee is like bold and take charge and really doesn't second guess herself and her instincts. Alexis second guesses everything, and in fact has always kind of felt like she's lived in her sister's shadow. And she's recently, well, not so recently, but recently for her, coming off a breakup in which her ex-boyfriend told her that she was like mousy and kind of unappealing in every aspect of her life, including in the bedroom. So that was a really low blow, but Alexis is kind of self-conscious enough to say, you know what? He's probably right. She's determined to fix it though, so she goes out. It's going to have her first one-night stand to spice up her life, and in the process meets a creep and then gets rescued from that creep by a gorgeous but foul-mouthed and very opposite kind of person named Logan. And they connect immediately, sparks despite being opposite, and Alexis starts to get her one-night stand that she was hoping for. And then a freak lightning storm causes a fire in the hotel where she and Logan are. They rush out. Alexis's ankle is sprained. Logan picks her up. And as soon as they make it out onto the streets, all these cameras start flashing and Logan takes off, leaving Alexis bewildered at why he's abandoned her. And the reason turns out to be, she discovers that he is actually the Democratic gubernatorial candidate for Texas who is running against the kind of incumbent old guard. And these spicy photos of him holding her could jeopardize his entire campaign. So his campaign comes to her with a proposal and really begging her to pretend to be in a steady, serious relationship with him in order to save his campaign. So that's not really an elevator pitch. It's like an elevator pitch from floor 59 all the way down to 0, but
it's just so good. He is hot, and I love him. I'd love to meet that man.
Yes, I think he is by far my favorite love interest I've ever
Yes,
written.
he's great. So you've written other books. In My Dreams, I Hold a Knife. That was a thriller. How do you go
Yes.
from writing a thriller to writing rom-coms?
I don't actually find it that well, they're different, but my writing process remains the same. I kind of approach both genres the same way and try to keep things like fresh and fast paced in my romance. And I always have romantic subplots in my thrillers. So it's
Okay.
just the question of, is there a dead body in this story? Yes or no? That makes it kind of different. But yeah, I pretty much treat it the same. And honestly, things fresh for my brain because I love a challenge. So I like bouncing between the two.
So your first book was In My Dreams, I Hold a Knife. What did you do before that?
Before that, I worked in the world of politics
Oh,
for
that's why
five
you do it
years.
well. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you. Yes, so I was one of those people kind of on the ground here I live here in Texas where the books are set, but I'm in Houston as opposed to Austin. And yeah, one of those people kind of behind the scenes trying to make change happen and working with advocates to do all sorts of things like protect educators, increase compensation and security and retirement security for educators, and work on criminal justice reform, all sorts of stuff here in
Oh
Texas.
wow.
So
Well, yeah,
yeah.
well, it shows in the book. You certainly knew your politics, so that was good.
Thank you.
So did you always
Yeah, it
want
was
to be in
hard.
law? Go ahead.
I was gonna say it was hard. I tried to like, give a little bit of politics, but not go full blown the way I totally could, just because I
Yeah.
nerd out about that sort of stuff. So hopefully I walked that line.
Did you
Okay.
always want to be an author?
Yes, since I knew that it was a possible career from like age 7 or 8, like I
Wow.
have this incredibly vivid memory of getting a homework assignment from a teacher to write something like one paragraph about a ship in the ocean and just treating it like it was my life's work, like it could have been up for a Pulitzer or something, just taking it so seriously and falling in love with language through like the process of I was like determined to figure out if I could make the sentences of my paragraph sound like waves
Oh wow.
hitting, yeah, the hull of a boat through the words that I chose. So I've always just been in love with language itself.
That's great. It shows and it's I just loved it.
Thank you.
What is your relationship with librarians though? I mean,
Oh, saviors. So I grew up the oldest of a family of four. My dad and mom met when they were both in the Navy. So they were both stationed abroad. Then we moved back to the States and we moved every 2 years. So a little family of four being uprooted every 2 years. And I was an incurably, devastatingly shy kid. Like I couldn't meet people's eyes. It's gotten better since I was a kid, but um yeah, social interactions were hard for me, especially being the new kid every two
yeah,
years
that is hard, sure.
so in lieu of actual friends, this is when I feel like such a nerd admitting this, but in lieu of actual friends, I turned to books and I was just obsessed with books. And we didn't have a ton of money growing up. It's just my mom ended up being a stay-at-home mom, and so was my dad in the Navy. And so libraries were where my parents took me, and they were my mecca, my playground. And I remember we moved to a military base once in California that had a library on the base.
Wow.
And this was the greatest thing that had ever happened to me. I could
Sure.
walk there. They trusted me to walk there. And I went there every week and I would get stacks of books so high that I would carry them home and barely be able to see like over the top of them, and just devour books. And I think I read every single book probably in the children's section and then moved on to the adult books, which my mom was like,
How old
not
were
so
you?
much. Yeah.
How old
So
were you
yeah.
then?
What was, oh,
How old were you?
I think I was 9 years old.
Oh,
9 to
wow.
10 is when we lived in that Point Mugu, that base in California, in like Ventura County. So yeah, I was too young to be reading the books, some of the books that I turned to later. But my mom put a quick stop to that. But yeah, and like libraries were just everything to me.
Who were some of your favorite authors back then?
Oh, I was
Judy
such a
Blume, I'm sure.
yeah, Judy Blume. I
Mhm.
was such a Sweet Valley High
Oh, okay.
girl. Oh my God, that shaped my brain for better and worse. I was obsessed with the Babysitter's Club.
Okay.
I loved Christopher Pike novels. So I think this is a pseudonym for Kevin McFadden, the author.
Mhm.
But essentially, these were like high drama vampire novels.
Oh, wow.
These are some of the ones my mom like read the back cover and was like, this going straight back to the
Those
library.
are adult books, or
They
those are
are
children?
they're YA, but my
YA.
mom, yeah, but I will say looking back, they're pretty like risque YA. So, but you could not stop me. I read the entire series of them just like in a corner of the library when I came back
Good
to
for
it.
you.
Yeah,
Good.
thank
Yeah,
you.
I loved reading from a very young age also. So it's just such a great thing.
It is. You're my
Be able to,
people.
yeah, thank you. Well, one of our other librarians loved In My Dreams, I Hold a Knife. I know
Oh,
that. So
thank you.
one of her,
Please thank them for me.
I certainly will. It's one of our staff picks. So,
Ah, I'm so honored. Thank
and
you.
I didn't read the other one, Fool Me Once. Now I got to go back and read that because I know so much about Lee now. I'd
Yes.
love to read her backstory.
Yes. And you know what? So, Fool Me Once and then The Boyfriend Candidate, they're the first books that I've written that exist in the same world. Other than these two, all of my books are standalones. And so, since I do like to challenge myself, I told myself writing The Boyfriend Candidate that, okay, this is your first time returning to the same world, but you're going to give readers a completely different perspective on the characters they met in Fool Me Once in book one. And so I took Lee and made her a little bit of an antagonist
Mhm.
to her sister Alexis in The Boyfriend Candidate. Whereas in Lee's own book, Fool Me Once, she's obviously the heroine. And so I did that because when I published Fool Me Once, Lee is a very strong female character. You know, she like knows what she wants and she goes after it, and she doesn't have a lot of remorse or shame. And I got a lot of feedback from readers that was like maybe she wasn't their favorite like female character, a little bit unlikable. And I take that as a badge of honor because I love writing unlikable women. That's like
Okay.
what I'm here to do. And so I played with that a little bit by making her the antagonist in The Boyfriend
So what
Candidate.
was the story in Fool Me Once about Lee?
Lee is basically her mission was to pass a huge history making climate change bill
Oh,
in
okay.
Texas of all places. And so she had to partner with her ex-boyfriend, who's working kind of like on a allied team to do that, put aside all of their differences and bickering to get this bill over the line. So it's like an enemies to lovers sort of romp.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when you put out In My Dreams, I Hold a Knife, was that during the pandemic?
It was.
Or you weren't
So
able to tour or anything?
I
Are you
wasn't.
hopefully you have something planned for the boyfriend candidate then?
I am so excited to say that I have a tour for the Boyfriend Candidate
Oh,
coming up. Starts next week with
great.
the publication. I will be here in Houston, of course, for my launch, Dallas, Pittsburgh, Florida, DC, and then I take a little break and go to North Carolina. So
Oh,
I
wow.
am everywhere.
Are you headed to New York at all?
I'm going to New York, but for my thriller work, going to
Oh,
Thriller
okay.
Fest. Yep.
Oh, when is
Um,
that?
that is the first weekend of June.
Uh-huh.
So I'm
You have
excited
another
about that.
thriller coming out?
I do. I have a thriller so I'm on a 2 book a year schedule
Oh,
for the
wow.
for the I
Wow, that's
know.
a
I'm like,
lot.
I'm exhausted just telling you that. Yes, so I have a thriller called Midnight is the Darkest Hour coming out on October 3rd.
Midnight is the darkest hour. Okay.
Yeah,
And that's October 3rd. Okay.
October 3rd. We're just finalizing the cover as
Oh,
we
wow.
speak, basically. Yeah,
I'll have to get my hands on an arc for that one.
absolutely.
Compare your two writing styles, your rom-coms. I mean, I love thrillers also, but lately I'm a rom-com gal. I just love rom-coms. And
Me
you know, it's funny. I
too.
was reading your book and I was also reading Abby Jimenez's book, um, yours truly, and you both
Yes.
have characters named Alexis in it,
Yep.
which I was
And
like, oh my gosh, there's two Alexis.
two Alexises, and
Yeah.
Abby was kind enough to blurb the boyfriend candidate.
Yes, I
So
see
her,
that right here. I'm gonna read
yeah,
that. Before
she's
the
right on the
boyfriend
cover.
candidate catches fire, sizzles throughout, and then bursts into flames. And that's by Abby Jimenez. And
Yep.
her book is called Yours Truly, which I'm reading right now. I'm listening to actually right now. And
Yep.
I was like surprised. I'm like, oh my gosh, Alexis is all over the place. Everybody has characters named Alexis. So
I wonder if it's Schitt's Creek. Did you watch that TV
no,
show
but
Schitt's
right,
Creek?
her name is Alexis, right?
Yes.
Right, that great character.
Great
Great.
character.
Yeah.
I asked actually, when we were thinking of titles for the boyfriend candidate, I asked my agent if she thought I could get away with calling it A Little Bit Alexis, because that's
Ah,
from a
right.
song that
That's the
Alexis
song.
sings,
Yeah, yeah,
and she was like, absolutely not. That's definitely
yeah.
copyrighted. Like, get out of here.
Yeah, they'll come after you. They won't
They'll
like
come
that
after
too
me.
much. Are you writing another rom-com in the same world?
I am not. I am sad to reveal, because all of my readers, when you read The Boyfriend Candidate, you like anyone who's listening can come talk to me in the DM in my Instagram DMs, but there's a character in The Boyfriend Candidate who really deserves his own love story because he gets jilted and he's a lovely guy.
Will?
Will, yeah.
Okay. I can
And
see that.
so my
The
original
doctor. Will
plan
the doctor, the brother of. Okay.
of Ben, yeah. So it
Right.
could be
Okay.
like a two family kind of universe of their love stories. And I would love to write Will's stories one day, but I have committed myself to these other books in the meantime. So it's gonna have to wait a little bit. Yeah.
Okay. But I do love I'm definitely going back to reading Fool Me Once because I love this whole world. I loved every character in there. I just thought it was great.
Thank you so much. That
Yeah,
I can't tell you, like my heart just grew three sizes.
it just was. It was just so much fun. It was a great book. I love the cover too. I mean, that's just such a great
Oh
cover.
my God. This is where I take the chance to shout out Hattie Windley, who's the illustrator. And I just think her work is incredible. She did Anita Kelly's romance, Love and Other Disasters, that came out last year. And she just has such a cool, distinctive style. This is me nerding out about the cover designer.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
it's the librarian and
Uh-huh.
the candidate who looks pretty harried with his tie undone and
Yep.
hand on his head, back of his head. It's a great cover.
Thank
Really great
you.
color. Nice blue. I like all the colors. It's a
Thank
good one,
you.
no doubt about it. So how did you come up with this? Like the candidate? Well, obviously you were in politics, so that's how you.
Well, yeah, that definitely informed the background of the book, and I felt comfortable knowing that I could write with a certain level of knowledge and expertise about the kind of backdoor politics here in Texas. But I will say, when I started with Fool Me Once, I came up with the idea, and I was thinking to myself, I'd spent years working in politics behind the scenes and would see the craziest shenanigans that never made it onto the front page of newspapers. But I sat there, and I think it was like a sanity preserving technique or something, where I would just think to myself, this is so ridiculous that it belongs in fiction. It's like stranger than fiction. And so I started to kind of imagine scenarios where I could use some of the like real life things that I was witnessing in all these bigger than life characters. And so then I just became really attached to some of the things I was thinking of. And it was again in the pandemic, because I released 3 books during the kind of like height of the pandemic. Um, And so it saved my sanity writing my first rom-com, Fool Me Once. It was like living in this sunshine, funny world where there's a guaranteed happy ever after. And it was just like, I think the same impulse that brought so many of us to binge read romance in the
Mhm.
pandemic,
Yes. I'm still not
so
out of it. I'm still
yeah,
in.
no, same. Yeah, I'm still there. I'm still living in that era,
Yeah.
in my romance era. So it was like that same impulse, creating Lee's story, and then my romance editor loved it so much, and she was like, okay, for book two, I want kind of more of the same for Alexis's book. Like, let's think about this political world or project that she could be involved in. And I will admit that stumped me for a little while because Lee is the one invested in
Mhm.
politics and working in politics. Alexis has, because Lee's chosen that path, she's like diverged, she's done her own thing. And so trying to figure out how to get Alexis into this world in a way that felt really authentic to her stumped me for a while until I thought about her stepping up to occupy this space of advocating for teachers' rights, educators' rights, greater compensation,
Right.
like you said. And a lot of that was inspired by me just watching the news and watching, teachers' unions
What about
fight
banned books?
and banned books. Exactly. And that makes an appearance as a storyline in this
Mm.
book as well.
Yeah. I mean, Texas
Yep.
especially. It's
Yes. I
horrible.
say like I say with a very heavy sigh.
Yeah.
Yes. And so making my little points in this book about how just absurd it is, especially for children, who are the people that we're trying ostensibly to kind of like protect, um, to have books be put out of access for them, that they may need. So, yeah, just watching the news and watching these epic battles that librarians and educators and teachers were fighting, everything from banned books to compensation to retirement, debates when retirement, getting, pensions getting slashed and all sorts of stuff. I know it's like the like nerdy stuff that maybe a whole lot of people are like, oh, how does this fit together with a romance story? But
Oh,
I was
it
determined,
does. It's
yeah, I was
it's
determined to make it
terrific.
work.
It does, especially if you care about educators and teachers and librarians. It's
Yep,
fabulous.
exactly.
Now, when you sit down to write a book, do you do an outline or do you just, and is it very different the way you do your thrillers and your rom-coms?
No, it is exactly the same.
Okay.
And I always watch people like look at me quizzically when I say that, but
Especially a thriller, because you really
it
need to plan that out.
oh yeah, but that's what I do with my romances too.
Yeah.
So I am the most type A, like meticulous plotter you could
Okay.
imagine. I have I create 42 page, that's my lowest numbered outline. 42-page outlines ahead of even starting to draft for every book. I kind of have to, this is just the way my brain works, is like I don't feel safe enough to start drafting until I've plotted every little piece of
Wow.
minutia. And I think I do that because I started writing thrillers.
Hmm.
And it felt like, okay, if I'm going to write this really twisty book full of red herrings where something in chapter 3 is going to come back in chapter 17 and then in 43, I really need to make this as tight,
Hmm.
as possible. And I just developed that muscle, and now I apply it to every genre. And so far, fingers crossed, it's working for me in terms of like, it lets me plot out books, feel creative, but also feel like, okay, now I'm ready to jump in and start drafting. So that's how I did Boyfriend Candidates. Like this immense, my poor editors, because they're like,
You knew
you know,
exactly what was going to happen before you even
exactly.
wrote. Okay.
Yep.
It wasn't like the characters told you which way to go while you were writing. Do you ever
I'm
change?
amazed when authors say that the
Yeah, I we
characters speak to them.
We
I'm
speak
like,
to so
that's some
many
kind
people.
of,
Yeah.
yeah, that's like witchcraft to me. That's
Yeah.
magic.
Do you ever change it after you've written your draft, your
Yes.
outline, and sometimes you're like, it's just not going the right way, and
Oh, totally.
yeah,
Yeah. Sometimes I'm like, you know what? That was a terrible idea. What was I thinking? This is much better. Or I'll get so inspired by something that I'm like, oh, an even better idea or place for this to go would be XYZ. So then,
yeah.
but even then, this is how type A I am. Instead of just writing it, I go back into my outline and
Change your outline first.
yes,
Okay,
I do.
that's wonderful. Did you have trouble getting published for your first book, or was it an easy process for you?
Oh, it was so hard. Yeah, I had so much
Wonderful.
trouble. In fact, my first book was not In My Dreams I Hold a Knife, and it wasn't even a thriller. I wrote a YA contemporary fantasy as my
Nice.
first book. Queried it to agents for about a year before, in the like feeling extremely desperate, I entered this program that used to exist called Pitch Wars. And I don't know if you're familiar with that or if listeners are. For those who aren't, it's like this golden ticket, like Willy Wonka sort of competition that used to exist on Twitter. Um, and it was just these very, very generous, established authors who said, you know what? We will mentor up and coming, unpublished,
That's so nice.
unagented, yeah, writers. And so thousands of people every year submitted their manuscripts, and they would choose 100 people because that's how many volunteers they usually had on a yearly basis, and then pair up the mentor with the unagented writer. They'd spend a few months completely gutting and rewriting that aspiring author's book, and then present it in what was called an agent showcase. So it was like Pitch Wars had a website, and on a certain day every year, it was the grand reveal
Wow.
where, yeah, all the authors would put a tiny excerpt of their new and a pitch of their new polished manuscript up, and the agents would actually like leave their requests in the comments. So it's a really big deal. It's probably it ended last year, but in its heyday, I would say it was probably the most well-known and competitive um, like pitch contest of its kind. And I happened to get in. That was my lucky break, was getting
Great.
in. Um, and I got my agent through that
That's so
process.
wonderful. Who else? Anybody else you know that got through that way?
Oh my gosh, all of my favorite writers, like
Wow.
Rosie Danon,
Oh, I liked
Meryl
her book.
Wilsner. Yep.
I
So
spoke to her recently. Yeah.
yep, and like the roommate, Rosie Danon's,
Yes, that was a good book.
that was her Pitch Wars book.
Yeah.
Ruby Barrett, um, who else? Oh, the author of Iron Widow, um, the YA like New York Times bestseller, um, just basically so many,
That's so great. Wow.
yes. Um, and yeah, there's like Adeline Grace was a Pitch Wars. She did just Belladonna recently was her
Uh-huh.
recent book. Yeah, there's so many of us who
Well,
came out of
that's
that
so
program.
wonderful. Wow.
Yeah,
Congratulations. That's great.
thank you.
So what are you reading now? Do you have, when you're writing, let's see, when you're writing romance, do you read thrillers? And when you're writing thrillers, do you read romance?
I will confess that I wish I could be that um like plan like that, but because I have such a long blurb to-do list, like a list of TBRs, my TBR is just all blurb books, is what I'm trying to say. And so basically I read whatever is due the soonest. So
Okay.
yeah, it'll toggle back and forth between thrillers and romances. And though right now I'm reading books for research, and I will actually like this book that I'm reading is called I Know Who You Are
Oh, the Golden
by,
State Killers. Yeah.
yes, by Barbara Ray Venter. And
Mhm.
she is the woman who, the amateur DNA sleuth who was working behind the scenes to catch the Golden State Killer. And she did it. And like she
Mhm.
changed investigation forever. So I'm reading that as research for an upcoming thriller.
Oh, wow. That's great. Good for you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank
We're
you.
gonna I'm running out of time here. So we've been chatting for a while, and it's been great
Yeah,
talking to you.
me
And
too.
I'll say it again. I love The Boyfriend Candidate. I highly recommend it. And I just want to thank Ashley so much for speaking with us. So I'm going to close this chapter on Turn the Page. And hopefully you'll come back and talk to us in October when Midnight is the Darkest Hour comes out.
I would love that. Thank you so much for having
Okay.
me, Evelyn.
Thank you so much, Ashley. It was great talking to you.
Pleasure.
Have a great day.
You
Take care.
too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
It's time to close this chapter of Turn the Page. Join us for the next episode.